This track focuses on exploring the possibilities and innovation of how to keep the planet safe. You will hear from impact VCs and founders who want to incentivize the change, while also expect to showcase of food tech solutions further down the road. Let's kick it off. Our next panel, which states the impact of the impact VCs. The panel will be moderated by a really good friend of mine, Helery, who is a co-founder and investor in Honey Badger Capital, a friend's office created alongside the founders of Pipedrive. In addition to this, she's a strong advocate of impact investing and the head organizer of Startup Regatta. If you haven't checked this, definitely do so. That's quite cool. And with your warmest possible welcomes, I am inviting to the stage Helery, Patrikas Feiferas, Alison Fort, and Sera Tsutsumi. Round of applause, guys.
Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. It's very exciting to be kicking off the impact track here at Latitude. I didn't hear how Tim introduced me, but I'm Helery. Yes, I like sailing, but I'm also an investor and founder at Honey Badger Capital. We're an early stage super angel syndicate by the Pipedrive founders. And when it comes to impact, then I can most accurately describe myself as an enthusiast. And that's why I'm very excited that I have this panel of experts with me on stage today. When I started in my position, then I quickly realized that there are two types of investors out there. There are the ones that want to save the world, and then there are the ones that actually make money. And thankfully now, a couple of years later, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think making an impact and making a return are no longer mutually exclusive. But this got me thinking, what are some of the other misconceptions that people hold about impact investing? And today, in the next 25 minutes, we have the chance to prove or disprove some of those conceptions. So if you haven't done it before, please scan this QR code and let us know what you think, because you have the chance to help us choose which ones we tackle today. And without further ado, our panelists. So let's start with Alison. Alison Fort is the CEO of Catapult Foundation with a really big mission. So how do you do what you do?
So Catapult is an impact VC. So we have Catapult VC, which invests in climate, ocean, and agri-tech. And then the Catapult Foundation sits alongside that. And we're helping move mindsets, move capital, move technology in the direction of a planet where people and the planet can thrive.
Very nice, thank you. Patrikas is joining us from Contrarian Ventures in Lithuania, and dare I say, it's the only fund in the Baltics that has the specific goal of decarbonizing the climate. Why do you think that is? Why is there not anyone else like you?
I think we slowly but surely getting there, given the crowd that we have in front of us interested and, people more and more being cautious and building solutions in this space. I think on Contrarian Ventures side, we started building the fund back in 2017. I think 2017, the space and the wording and definitions were completely different back then. I think climate tech was not a word. Impact was not a word. We ourselves are not, let's say, impact fund per se. We look more through the lenses of decarbonization. So whatever we invest into, we kind of say it has an impact embedded into it. And obviously, as this whole industry evolves, and so do our thinking, we try to figure out what are these best ways for these, early stage companies where we invest in seed stage, usually all across Europe and Israel. What's the right path or methodology to apply to, appropriately measure the impact, ESG, or whatever that metric for one to be. So excited to have fellow panelists and looking forward to discussion.
Definitely.
research also shows that Patrikas is a fluent Chinese speaker, so if you need an icebreaker with him later, then that should be the one you go with. And Sera Tsutsumi manages Digital Garage, an ESG-driven early-stage fund in Tokyo. So what motivates you? What do you do?
Right. I've seen a couple of Japanese actually, but have you ever been to Japan, planning on Japan, maybe? I don't know. Well, basically what we do is an investor and accelerator program in Japan. We launched the Japanese first accelerator back in 2010, and since then we've been dedicated to startup community. We're the first one, brought Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn from the US to Japan, so we have a lot of history. But now that I'm looking at more like sustainability, impact investment perspective, and we do have a responsible investment fund attached to the accelerator program. Basically, we wanted to try to promote the impact mindset, sustainability mindset within those acceleration program.
Thank you and welcome. So I have some answers coming in now, but you can still scan the QR code and tell us what you want to hear about. But by far, the most interesting one for us to tackle today is the idea that measuring impact is hard. Patrikas, do you want to tackle this one to begin with?
Sure, I can kick off, and then guys, I think you can add as we go down the road. So I think at least how we look at it, there are 3 points to it. One point is the stuff we invest into is usually, early stage, meaning seed or pre-seed. It's usually 3 employees or 3 smart founders that have an idea in their head and want to, build something of a big vision that something they can execute on. So a lot of people, I think, have this misconception where they try to, equal these early stage companies to the companies like, Google, Amazon, or, other companies on S&P 500, which have, huge internal departments of, 20 plus people doing that day to day and basically managing that as a full-time job. So I think it has to be a very customized solution for all of these, taking into account that not only you need to be impactful, but in first place you have to build business. And I think impact by default will come by itself. If it's a impactful business. Then I think second argument to it is that even though it's within the climate tech umbrella under our focus, one business is never equal to another. So for example, if you look into something that's pure hardware, kind of direct air capture or hydrogen production, then the impact is very clear. It's very direct. You produce green hydrogen, you remove CO2 from the atmosphere. It's kind of clear by the time you get to that point where you do the actual action. But then if you look on the software side, it becomes much more difficult to estimate one's impact, because usually it comes through productivity gains, through efficiency in processes, and it's more so some soft metrics that you need to apply. And then again, all of these are early stage, and all of these are different, I think, business models that are tackling this whole impact question. And I think the last point is you still have to be very careful about claiming about specific impact one company might have. I think there's a lot of movement in the space where people talking, investing in businesses only which yield hundreds of megatons of CO2 reduction, even though, these companies, as some of us know, in the distribution of startups might not be even the market in the upcoming 5 years. So I think, at least on our side, we also being very cautious and, not try to overestimate or put a number, a cap, both limiting us and then maybe get us prone to some potential, even greenwashing risk.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just go, we invest also early stage, and I think crisply, it can be difficult, but it doesn't have to be. So I think, it is having sort of an impact management measurement program that is fit for purpose. So why are you doing this in the first place? Are you trying to learn something? Are you trying to prove something? You're trying to improve something. And how do you work with the founders with that mindset? So working with them to understand how is managing and measuring their impact going to help them be successful. So what is it that they can be measuring that sort of highlights how well they're doing, what customers they're attracting, how they're managing their businesses, how they're going to attract employees, and how can they include those metrics in some of their narrative. And I think then you can have a great conversation. It's not sort of fill out sort of a 30-page impact measurement questionnaire. It's like, let's together come up with one or two things that are going to be critical for your organization. And then you as an investor learn, and the company can benefit.
Sera, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially because I'm looking at more toward the early stage startups. Like you said, what we prioritize is more intention of the founders, because when it comes to metrics or numbers, it gets super messy. And then at the end of the day, they may change their own business. So we would rather spend more time on talking to the founders and see what's the intention of the business. And the other thing is that in terms of the impact investment, it's still at least emerging in some countries, like Japan or in Asia. So there is this community, which is not that big, but it's still active, that we can actually learn from each other. And then there's a lot of like networking resources available. So we don't need to like afraid of getting started actually, but we can just step ahead and like try to have a mindset and then promote it within the community. I think the step-by-step process really matters.
And I'll just say as well that I think this is actually where an impact investor can really add value. You know, because ultimately we want to have an impact too. And it's just the enterprises that are having the impact. It's like, what's our role in this?
Right.
And this is where we can really, and running an accelerator program gives you a great opportunity to do that as well, to work with the founders.
So one word answer, measuring impact is hard, yes or no?
Sometimes.
Right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, I would say, yeah, most of the time, at least in our case.
Sera?
Yeah, I agree most of the time.
Most of the times. All right, let's move on to the next one. I think they disappeared from the screen here, but the next one is impact investing and ESG investing are the same thing. So are we even speaking the same language when we talk about impact? Sera, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's connected. I would say it's connected, definitely. But essentially, it's different. ESG investment is more toward the risk lens. So they measure how it would affect in the future. Whereas impact investment, we're looking into more positive impact or the negative impact and measuring it and make sure whatever the business that they operate actually matter, actually changing the society or not. That's like a huge difference. And I see that a lot of people actually misunderstand the difference between it. Any comment on that?
100% agree.
Yeah.
So a risk lens versus, as you say, an intentionality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that ESG has become like basic hygiene that you have to do at the fundamental business level, where you have a questionnaire that's 35 to 40 questions, depending most probably on the stage your company is. You check the box, you adopt the policy, and that's it. Voila, you ESG compliant. But I think when we talk about impact, it's something, you know, much bigger, most probably not only to the stakeholders of the company, but also to the broader society, to planet, and, you know, everyone else around the world. So if it was me, I wouldn't say it's very equal, but I could say that ESG can be embedded into an impact, and ESG is this building block that you try to build impact on top of it. But if you miss the ESG, you can't even build the impact.
So do you have an ESG process within your fund as well? You report on ESG metrics?
So we are trying to actually build a questionnaire of our own. We went out, and again, I think comes from discussion where we feel that at this point of time, there is no one source of truth which can be applied. So it's still a bit of a brute forcing exercise where you go and try out. So we talked with a bunch of folks. Obviously there are many generous funds out there putting or open sourcing their methodology. We went out, trimmed the questions that didn't make sense, adopted the ones that did, and now kind of through most of the investments that we go or we do, we try and give that ESG questionnaire for the founders to fill out and then get some feedback and see, how they react, what makes sense, what doesn't. And actually and I think this is also interesting that we internally had this discussion. What is a good ESG or what is a bad ESG for seed stage company? And obviously there is no benchmark for it. And should we value? Should we say 50 is good and 40 is bad? And then we came up also with this idea, and obviously that's given a proper sample size we're going to do, is by the time we're going to do, hundreds of these ESG questionnaires, we'll have a goal to actually establish what's the baseline good ESG score for seed stage companies, for Series A stage companies, Series B, and so forth. So I think there's still a lot of figuring out in the space, but we at least try and reiterate as we go.
I have a quick follow-up question there. Do you think the founders that you're working with understand these differences? Do they understand the vocabulary?
Ours do. I mean, we are an impact fund, impact accelerators. They're applying to us because of that. They're actually really excited about the impact portion of our program. And so they know the change that they want to make in the world, but want some assistance with how to deepen, strengthen, articulate that. On the ESG side, maybe less. And also, I don't know, you guys as well, the thing that I really hate is if you get a founder that is solving every SDG. Or you get all 17 goals that they say that they're doing. And trying to sort of unpick that and unpick ESG and sort of help them understand sort of where they're really having the most impact and sort of factors that they should be considering, I think is, again, where we can play a role.
I would be keen on hearing, actually, Sera, given you mentioned, and sorry for stealing the little moderator. It would be interesting, actually, to hear how it goes on your side when as you mentioned before, there's not a big thing, the impact or ESG in Japan. And when you go and approach these entrepreneurs and try talking to them, what's their kind of immediate reaction or the feedback that you get from them?
I mean, they are, generally speaking, interested in, because the whole trend and movement, they're aware. It's just they don't know what to start. In case of either ESG or impact, it's the same. Basically, they don't know what to do with it. They're willing to do it. They wanted to learn from it. It's just there's not much resource available in Japan for entrepreneurs. That's what we're trying to implement, starting with what's ESG, what's SDGs, what's impact, what's the difference, what we should start. That's the basic thing that we care about a lot. That's essentially how to cultivate the intention in the first place. So yes.
So we have time for one more, and it's a good one. We don't need any more impact funds. Alison, what do you think?
All right, so we don't need any more non-impact funds. Because all capital, all companies are having an impact, right? But is it negative, is it neutral, is it positive? So that's the way to think about it. How do we diminish the negative and the neutral and increase the positives?
I completely agree. I mean, especially in Japan, it's not really that popular, so we still need more and more impact fund. But essentially, I think the impact investment or the idea of impact making is going to get in toward a norm in the near future. Every or most of those fund or investment will go in toward by looking at the impact lens as well. So I think it's getting merged into more traditional players.
And just I'll say follow up as well. So we've now hit 1 trillion assets under management has been impact. So we all pat ourselves on the back. We were zero, but that's still like a tiny proportion of total global sort of assets under management, and we've still got a 2.5 trillion gap to meet the SDGs. So yes, we need
definitely
more
right. Yeah.
Anything to add as the only real ESG-driven fund in the Baltics? Do you think there should be more?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different buckets to put it into. I think what's most important is people being truthful and, not just and again, referring to some other questions, not just try and chase the trend, but actually, if deploying to the sector, be truthful to themselves, be honest to entrepreneurs, and be honest to everyone that, they have a reason, they believe it, and they, tackle it. Because I think otherwise it's going to be some problems in the space where we had Clean Tech 1.0 and we had a bunch of generalist investors shopping around like tourists and then, losing all the money because they thought it's fun and it's going to, be the new thing. So I think, yeah, at least from my side, what's most important is be truthful.
Mm-hmm. But do you think that generalists could go to that direction?
I think they slowly going to that direction. I think at least from our space, if we look climate tech specifically, there's still a lot of specialists that we need. But then when you look into specialists, a lot of the specialists only do software. For example, they don't want to dip their toes into complex hydrogen, direct air capture, sustainable aviation, that kind of stuff. So I think that we need some more of these investors appearing and taking that risk. And then when you dig even deeper and you look through development cycle of these, deep tech hardware projects, you have to have additional catalytical capital within the ecosystem. And I'm not talking about the traditional venture capital fund where you invest at, get 10%, invest 1 million at 10 million, and you aim for 10x. But it's more so you come in when technology is not yet fully de-risked. It's going through the commercialization cycle, and there comes an investor where for VC, it's the risk return or the return is too small and the risk too high, and for infrastructure, the risk too high and return too small. So I think there's also a gap in between the VC and infrastructure financing that has to be filled. And I think there's already some great examples appearing in the space. There is S2G Ventures from Chicago. They launched this new climate tech fund of 300 million, where they do specifically for these projects from 10 to 30 million. And instead of aiming for 10x, they just aim from 12 to 15% of return annually. And again, catering for that specific category and, de-risking and scaling those technologies as we go.
You raise a couple of good points. So one, I think the community of VCs that are wanting to move into impact is definitely sort of growing. So we helped launch Community Impact VC in January of this year. And we put together a playbook, sort of co-authored a playbook with other impact VCs. And we launched this and sort of expected that we'd get 20, 30 VCs wanting to join this community, but it completely sort of blew our minds. So there were hundreds of people sort of wanting to join this community, and a lot from the generalist space, saying, okay, this impact thing is a thing. How am I going to learn? I need to join a community of peers. So I think that's a really interesting data point. That wasn't there sort of 5 years ago.
And the playbook you're giving out for free to everyone,
yeah.
Right?
And
interesting fact is that I'm actually leading the group of the venture capital trying to promote impact investment in Japan. And we just found about the the playbook, and we decided to translate into Japanese and try to make the Japanese version of it. Essentially because the impact field is slightly different in each region. There's a regional aspect. So we can't really implement everything of the one in Europe, but we are trying to create the Japanese version of the playbook based on the prior playbook. That's the whole community is right now. They're trying to learn from each other, which I think is really awesome.
It's really cool. And then the other thing that you mentioned was catalytic capital. And I think this is a space that is sort of really starting to develop. And I think a lot of the opportunity there is for private capital and actually sort of foundation capital. So the C3 initiative in sort of the US is sort of a big one that's sort of developed where you've got sort of foundations and private wealth saying, we are the flexible capital here, we should be playing that role. How can we go places where private equity can't, where we can take those bigger risks and really catalyze a market or a movement or a space. So I think we're getting different layers of impact emerging, which is great.
So with a couple of minutes left on the clock, are there any thoughts that you want to leave the audience with today?
So I'd like to invite everybody to come to Oslo next week. So if you're enjoying this and want more on impact investing, impact tech, founders, we have Catapult Future Fest running in Oslo the 1st and 2nd of June. So check it out and come on over.
What about you?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment about a little connected to the point of the, where is it? No, I just wanted to talk to you about whether impact investment is only like one particular industry or not. I think it goes toward more open. I think that impact investment is not only about one particular group of people, just because right now, because it's an emergent phase, I think what is important is in the impact investment is making an impact in the whole society. I think starting from one particular individual throughout the whole country or the region, I think that really matters, making the whole impact investment bigger. So I think I ask you all for more interest, and then we can get together, we can learn each other, and then hopefully we can actually change the world.
Yeah, and just I think, look, at this point of time, it's something new, something unexplored, something which most of the time is taken as a market premium, at least from my lenses, and all the stakeholders asking more and more for this. Then there's regulatory push, there is grants, there is various incentives coming in, but I think at the end of the day, those who will be able to capitalize on this opportunity and kind of start speaking early about this, adopt initiatives, and start thinking at least back of their head how impactful can they be, I think they're going to be much far ahead in the game and in the competition versus anyone else in this space. And then obviously 5 to 10 years later is going to become a new norm.
I hope so. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you stay here for the rest of the track. It's going to be pretty good.
Thank you, Helery, and to all the panelists. It was great to have you here.